They sat me by the kitchen door, where the smell of gravy clung to my hair and laughter floated just out of reach. Forks scraped plates in practice rhythm, while someone raised a glass, eyes cold on me. Well, at least she's here now, scrubbing floors instead of files. I swallowed hard, staring at the cracked wine glass, chewing silence until it splintered behind my teeth. No one spoke of the nights I crawled through fire, skin blistering to save people I'd never meet again. Fork hits plate, my name absent from every story told, like I hadn't bled for strangers. Breath caught in my chest. Then the door swung open. A man froze mid-step, eyes widening in disbelief. He straightened slowly, voice cutting through the hush. "Ma'am, Captain, before I share my story, I want to know you're here with me. Just say hi in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. And if this story moves something in you, consider subscribing." They set my chair too close to the kitchen door, where cold air pulled against my side each time it swung open with a hush of apron staff. Silver trays rattling like distant applause meant for someone else. Overhead, the chandelier threw a lazy, faded glow, pooling in gold around the center of the table, and leaving my corner in grainy shadow, half my face lit, half sinking into something I didn't want to name. The table was long enough to hold everyone, but small enough that their laughter still landed against my skin. Too bright, too easy. I could hear the delicate chime of glasses at the far end. A toast I wasn't asked to raise, words of praise that never curved my way. They turned to me once, a quick greeting soft as tissue, a name spoken like an afterthought before eyes slid elsewhere. An aunt with careful hair reached to squeeze my arm, but her fingers left cold dents. My mother's perfume floated past, cheaply familiar, and she asked how I'd been without waiting for the answer to form, pivoting to mention Ethan's big news, her voice rising just enough for the table to hush and listen. He laughed, easy, relaxed, light from the chandelier catching the polish of his cufflinks, while my own sleeve sat heavy on my wrists. I tried once to speak, felt the start of a sentence crack in my chest, before someone else answered for me, the conversation sliding sideways like oil on water, the scrape of cutlery, a knife tapping a plate in absent rhythm. My fingers pressed into the thin stem of my glass, thumb finding the ridge where the seam was flawed. I watched the wine inside catch the dim light, swirl and still. When the laughter flared again, it felt further away, the glow on their faces giving them the look of old statues lined up for display, unmoving except for eyes that refused to settle on me. I let my hand fall to the table, palm flat, breathing once, twice, slow, as the sound of a fork dropped somewhere at the far end. They set the table without thinking where I'd fit. Chair angled just enough that I had to turn to see anyone's face, the leg scraping over old tile when I tried to pull it closer. The light fell in soft golden pools that didn't reach my side, leaving a dull smear of shadow over the white tablecloth, catching on my empty glass. I watched candlelight flicker along the length of polished silver, bending around the shape of people leaning in to talk, never toward me. Someone's voice drifted over the hum. "Is that for... Oh, sorry, Lillian, right?" Said like they were testing if it was still my name. I nodded before they could see my mouth tighten. There was a framed photo on the sideboard, new, glossy, everyone pressed together in bright clothes, teeth bared in practiced smiles. I wasn't in it. A gift bag marked, "For the family," sat open near my chair, the tissue paper already sagging, something generic inside. The roast passed twice without pause, the platter's heat leaving a ghost of warmth as it went by. I heard the scrape of a spoon in gravy, out of time with the careful clinking of cutlery. Muffled laughter floated up from the center of the table, growing full and round, settling in my chest like a weight. "Lillian," someone said again, this time hesitant, tone polite but distracted, eyes already lifting past me. They mentioned what a help Sarah had been organizing everything, praised her for thinking of the candles, the music, even the seating. Someone else nodded and added they'd heard Ethan made the sauce. Wasn't that thoughtful? I opened my mouth to say I'd brought wine, but the words caught when the subject switched. their voices warm and sure without me. I caught myself rolling the stem of my glass between my fingers, thumb resting on the fine crack along its side. I shifted in the chair, feeling it wobble slightly, one leg shorter than the rest, squeaking whenever I moved. My hand brushed the napkin on my lap, smoothing it though no one was looking. The air from the window hit cold against my arm, the curtains drawn back to show only blackness outside. I could smell the trace of my mother's perfume when she leaned behind me to pick up a plate, said nothing, turned without waiting. I felt the cold of the glass when I lifted it to my lips but didn't drink, just let it touch my mouth, eyes lowering to the faint ring of water on the cloth before me. They shifted the chairs so Emily stood where the light fell full and warm, the overhead fixture glowing around her hair, making the silver in her earrings blink like tiny stars. She smiled without rushing, hands resting lightly on the table as if she had always known the weight of family attention. "Emily, that was so thoughtful," someone said, voice rounding her name like it was a gift. Another voice repeated it, a little louder, pleased to let it linger. The shine off her glass caught in their eyes, and the candle nearest me sputtered low, its light bending toward her. Applause began in one corner of the table, spreading in uneven waves, until palms met, like practice ceremony, the sound settling over the cloth like a gentle rain. "Honestly, Emily, you're incredible," my uncle said, voice full, drawing heads around. She ducked just enough to look modest, laughter tumbling softly from her throat, caught by the chandelier overhead. My mother clapped twice, firm, watching only her, eyes crinkled at the corners. I heard my own name drift out from somewhere, flat and cautious, like a label read off a list. Lena, then nothing more. Silverware shifted, and all the eyes I could see pulled back to Emily, soft with approval. I felt the breath catch in my throat, the start of a word dying against the back of my teeth. My fingers found the cool of the glass stem, pressing so hard the seam dug in. But I didn't lift it. My mouth parted once, then closed again, the heat in my face falling away to something hollow. I turned a fraction, enough to see the china cabinet's glass door reflecting it all in dull layers. Emily's silhouette was clean, upright. My own caught behind a line of dark wood, warped and half hidden by the stacked plate. The sounds of the table fell flat against my chest. I blinked once, slow, and felt the chair under me shift with the weight. I didn't move. My hand relaxed, fingers smoothing along the side of the glass but refusing to pick it up. The candle behind Emily threw her shadow in crisp relief on the wall, a shape whole and certain, while mine broke against the edge of the table and floor, a crooked blur cut by chair legs. The clapping faded in uneven trickles, leaving only a hush pressed against the walls, and I let my eyes drop to the small pool of wax seeping over the candle's edge, watching it cool into silence. I let my fingers spin the glass, slow circles making the light slide up and down its side. My voice caught at first, just a breath. Then I tried again, leaning in slightly, hoping the movement would pull someone's eyes. "How I was thinking about that summer," I said, softer than I meant, careful with each word like it might fall and shatter. My gaze slipped from face to face, landing on my mother, waiting for the twitch of her eyebrow, the small nod that would say she heard. My thumb rubbed the seam of the glass, hesitating on the edge of the story that wanted to come out. I barely had time to draw the next breath before a laugh broke open at the other end of the table. Too loud, too sharp, making silverware tremble. A glass struck the wood, dull and solid. "Emily, stop," someone called, her name rolling out again, softer the second time, like they wanted to hold it close. The light that had pooled on my side of the table seemed to drift with them, leaving me in dimmer tones. My sentence slipped, words crumbling on my tongue, the rest of it falling back down my throat without fight. My fingers eased off the glass, pulling back, resting in my lap with the gentlest shame. I blinked at the plates between us, shapes of reflected laughter twisting in the silver. My eyes darted once around the table, faces turned away, shoulders pulled in toward her. The napkin lay slack on my knee. I set the glass down with deliberate quiet, as if noise might startle someone. My mouth opened, but found no breath to fill it, lips pressing shut, until the line felt thin and fragile. I exhaled slow, tried again to lean forward, but only managed a small shift before I settled back. The air felt tight around my ribs. My fingers traced the edge of the cloth, thumb flattening a wrinkle no one else saw. I straightened, pulling away from the table's warmth by an inch or two. Space enough to remind me I was there, but not really. The candle at the center flickered with a new gust, bending its glow away from my corner. At the edge of my vision, I watched a photograph tilt from a careless elbow, frame shifting just enough to catch my reflection warped in the glass. My shoulders bent, face split by the seam. I reached out but didn't fix it, letting it stay off kilter as the room's laughter faded into murmurs, and my hand fell back to my lap. They said her name once, then again, as if repeating it gave it weight. Emily, really? Emily? Their voices curling around it, pressing it into the candlelight, making the table lean her direction without anyone shifting a chair. Glass met glass with a muted chime, a kind of agreement that didn't need words, and laughter rolled low and warm like a blanket tugged just to her side. I watched the light fall on her hair, catching in slow waves, framing her in something softer than the shadows that edged my own place. I looked without blinking, eyes tracing the line of her arm as she lifted her glass just enough to draw attention, her fingers resting delicate against the stem, and the glow on her face made it hard to know if she was listening or just there, receiving. The name felt louder the second time, settling in the quiet between voices like it belonged there, like it had always been carved into this room. I remembered, maybe, a different laugh. Another time they turned with the same open faces, but it blurred as soon as I tried to hold it, soft at the edges, like a dream that wouldn't keep shape. My thumb dragged a line through the condensation on my own glass, slow, deliberate, making small circles I didn't finish. I let the rim meet my lip, pausing there, cold and unmoving, before letting it sink back to the table with a hush no one heard. My fingers pressed into the napkin, folding it without thought, flattening it twice. Again, as if the creases could keep my hands busy enough to hold me in place. My shoulder dropped, pulled forward, then rolled back, settling into something smaller, less seen. My breath coming out in a measured slip that felt rehearsed. There was a question in my mouth that didn't leave, the start of something that brushed against my teeth, catching, unfinished. Words that might have been about why or how or if, but they didn't form. So then, just air against my tongue. My eyes found the edge of the table, followed the line of it until it broke against the shadow on the floor. The reflection in the glass cabinet, a smear of faces, hers standing taller, mine bending behind. I watched the light puddle on the ground, the shine breaking into angles that didn't reach me, and let my gaze drop until I wasn't looking at anything at all. I watched them through the soft flicker of the chandelier. Glass raised halfway to lips, faces leaning in closer to the warmth pooled at the center of the table, laughter weaving through the silver and linen in gentle loops, the sound muffled at the edges like it was pressing against water, the curve of their mouths clear even when my focus blurred, light catching in the wine and splitting into small, trembling sparks, moving without touching. My fingers found the napkin folded on my lap, smoothing it with the flat of my palm, folding it tighter once, twice, the edge sharp under my thumb, pausing as if waiting for a sound, a name called, anything to catch against my ear. But it stayed quiet on my side. The air unmoved, their words skipping over like stones on a pond that didn't ripple here, my eyes resting on the candle. I let my hand drop slow to the arm of the chair, pushing just enough to shift weight, heel turning against the floor in a small scrape that no one seemed to hear, knees brushing the table's edge before I found balance standing, one shoulder angling toward the room for half a second before falling back, my fingers grazing the fabric of my coat draped behind me, gathering it in slow folds, the weight of it settling in the crook of... I paused there, back to the table, hand on the chair's top rail, guiding it in with small steps so it kissed the table's edge again. Straightened, the napkin folded tight on the plate untouched. The glass still half full, light shining over the surface in trembling gold, unbroken. My reflection a thin line along the stem, watching the seat slip into shadow as the chandelier caught more of them and less of me. Fading gently, caught more of them and less of me. I moved one foot, then the other, soles finding the floor with soft, careful taps. Sound swallowed into the rug before the wood picked it up again in small echoes. Hand closing around the doorframe, not to pull but to rest, to feel the cool of it under my palm. Fingers pressing just enough to know it was there. The coat heavy at my side, shifting against my leg. The room behind me not pausing, voices rising, and dipping in saying or hythem. I glanced once over my shoulder without turning fully, watching the glow hold steady over the table. Chairs full except for one, set right, napkin in place, glass catching light with a still surface. No clink, no toast. The laugh I heard last still unbroken, spreading in warm arcs that didn't reach the doorway where I stood, where the light bent away and left me to finish the breath. I watched from the edge where the light fell softer, her fingers smoothing the napkin just so, turning the silverware with that careful twist until it lined in quiet rows, the candle burning steadier for her breath alone. Voices calling her name easy, warm, the syllables rolling out like they'd practiced, laughter settling into the table's spine, the chairs angling without anyone seeming to move, glasses raised with small clinks that found utter spilled light. My eyes lingered on the vase she adjusted, flowers dipping the same way I remembered bending them, thumb pressing the stems until they stayed, her hand tracing the rim of the plate before sliding it forward, wrist at that angle that told the guests they were welcome, or maybe just that they should be here, the glass catching her reflection full, mine slicing through behind, faded, the edge of the cabinet showing us both, but her brighter. I let my hand find the glass, but didn't lift it, the cool settling through my fingers slow, pressing into skin like memory, thumb moving in a slow circle over a drop of water, clinging to the side, the sound around me moving on without pause. Someone saying her name again with that tilt of thanks that drew nods, heads turning just enough to leave my view of them, mostly shoulder, mostly hair, the words mixing with the clatter of cutlery, finding her shoulder, mostly hair. My chair shifted when I leaned back just enough to break the line of the table, breath leaving in pieces that didn't want to gather, fingers uncurled from the napkin edge, smoothed it once before letting go, the cushion pushing back a little as I moved. The cushion pushing back a little as I moved, the space between us folding smaller with no noise to mark it, no voice to close it, eyes dropping to the place the light ended on the floor, thin line of brightness bending away, refusing to hold. In the reflection I saw her clearer than me, her smile catching something I couldn't keep in focus, the glass between us making her edges clean, mine broken in refracted lines, one side of my face dark, where the candle didn't reach, the thought trying to form. Once, but catching before it finished, the shape of it sliding away like breath on glass that didn't stay fogged, the chair beneath me quiet, settled, waiting for nothing. A server passed behind me slow, the hush of fabric brushing the back of my chair, one hand steadying a tray, the other lowering a glass onto the table with deliberate care, the rim set just so it wouldn't tip. Eyes meeting mine for a second longer than needed. No question. No smile. Just there. The flicker of a nod so small it might not happened. Light pooling against the side of my face before bending away to catch I watched fingers slide the napkin back toward me, straightening the edge where I'd let it wrinkle, thumbs smoothing it flat without rush. The weight of it returned like something remembered. No words offered. No check if it was wanted. Just there, and I found my eyes following the crease they left, the faint warmth of a palm pressed into the fabric for an instant before the space cooled again, the candle catching the motion in gold, and around me, voices lifted with easy cadence. Can you hand that to "What's her name again?" someone asked without waiting for correction. Another picked it up with half a laugh. "Just pass it." Eyes sliding over without stopping, the word dying in the scrape of silver on china. But when the server stepped back, they said soft, even, "Ma'am," with that small dip of the head that left no space for forgetting. My breath caught, not sharp, just slower than I expected, fingers tightening around the stem of my glass, where the condensation pooled cool, thumb tracing the seam with care, the edge of my nail tapping once before settling, my shoulders rolling back then down, the napkin now set straight in front of me, the weight of the chair pressing gentle into the curve of my back, without pushing, my eyes lowering it. Someone laughed behind me, the sound wide and open, light spilling from overhead, catching the line of the server's shoulder as they turned away, their steps unhurried, the faint squeak of shoes on tile, the cloth of their sleeve brushing the edge of my seat, leaving the space in front of me ordered, glass-centered, napkin precise, the candle flame bending once before stilling, the light softening over the table. My eyes stayed. I saw him across the table, the space not so far you couldn't hear the scrape of his chair shifting. The small laugh that broke open slow, caught in the curve of glass raised halfway, light from the chandelier bending over one side of his face, while the other stayed in that soft, steady shadow, our eyes meeting once. Quick, unsteady, not held. Not asked to stay, the candle between us. I watched the way his shoulder turned, not toward me, but angled enough I could see the fold in the fabric at his elbow, the place a hand might have rested once, the napkin caught against the plate edge, where a finger smoothed it flat. Memory slipping through another night, another hush, the tilt of his head that meant no. The small, slow tightening of arms across his chest. The sound of a spoon falling just hard enough arms across his chest. The sound of a spoon falling just hard enough. My hand found the top of my chair, fingers bending to hold it without pulling closer, thumb stroking the grain like it might answer. My eyes dropping to the line where table met floor, catching the reflection of the candle flame, bending into, letting it split across the shine of my glass, before settling, his voice low and even somewhere else, saying nothing with my name in it. The laugh that followed pressing the silence back to him, filling the place's words, might have settled its back to. My breath found my chest and held, long enough to make my shoulders round. The cloth in my lap, gathering in slow folds under my palm, my other hand brushing the base of the glass before stopping, pressing instead against the cool edge of the table, eyes softening just enough to let the room blur, chin dipping in a nod that didn't ask for return, the glow on my skin paling where the candle turned its light away, leaving half my face in wrist light away. When I moved, it was only the chair that noticed, legs grating quiet over tile, stopping short so the edge touched the table just right. The napkin left, folded clean, the cushion holding no shape, the candle still steady in its pool of melted wax, the shadow cast onto the wall, leaving a gap where there should have been another outline, the light above warm, even generous, but holding no one in it at all. I stepped just past the doorway, letting my eyes sweep over the room slow, the overhead light throwing its gold in thick pools that landed where they always had, over the table I once sat with measured care, the chair at the head with the small scuff I'd tried to polish out, the framed photo on the sideboard that I remembered choosing for its muted edge, glass reflecting back the scene, now but catching only shapes, lines. My gaze found the place where my hand used to rest on the table's edge, the grain worn to a duller sheen there, fingers once brushing crumbs into the hollow of my palm, now empty, except for the curl of light along varnish, the napkin folded just right in another's lap, the glass in front of them catching the chandelier in fine fractures, throwing brightness onto a face that didn't seem to notice it landing. The motion of their wrist turning the stem. They leaned in close to listen, elbows meeting softly on linen, voices calling the new name without pause. Clear, unbroken, once, twice, no slip in syllable or glance, the sound of silverware resting polite against plates, chairs drawn in tighter to them, space closing without anyone remarking it was smaller. My own spot at the side left a touch angled, shadow cutting it in half. Where the light stopped caring, the laugh that rose then fell in. I let my hand hover over the back of a chair, fingers pressing gentle into the wood, feeling it give just enough to remind me it moved, thumb sliding along the edge before lifting away, palm falling to my side, my eyes dropping to the floor where the glow stopped short of my feet, watching the line between warm and cool draw itself across tile, without fuss, breath pulling slow, chest barely shifting. The neck, I didn't sit, didn't lean, just let the space stay, shoulders lowering on their own, head tilting enough to see the way the light filled the seat without needing me. The cushion shaped for someone else's weight, the glass left full, clear, unclaimed, shining quiet under the chandelier that burned steady, indifferent. The whole room holding its warmth in the center while the edges softened, cooled, stayed with. I sat still enough to feel the weight of the chair settle beneath me, spine pressing slow into the curve of the wood, eyes lifted just enough to catch the podium where the mic crackled once before the voice filled the room, calm, measured, spilling words that felt like they should have landed here, on this side of the table, naming details too exact to be anyone else. Except the name they spoke was different, wrenching out clar, round, confident, claiming space it hadn't earned. My breath caught halfway, ribs tightening around it, eyes blinking once in that half second of waiting, as if it might turn, correct, offer back what it took. But the sound kept going, unbroken, the smile on the other face catching the spotlight easy, forehead glowing in the warm cone of the overhead lamp, glasses lifted toward them in slow, deliberate arcs, clinking in polite unison, the applause building not as surprise. I watched fingers move over the mic, adjusting it for height, the hush before the next words pulling everyone forward just enough, chairs creaking soft, my own unmoving except for the shift of weight in my palm, pressing the napkin flat against the table, thumb smoothing the edge slow, no crease left behind, the glass in front of me, throwing back warped reflections of hands applauding, faces angled toward the light, no turning hair. Somewhere in the row of chairs, a head turned too slow, eyes finding mine for just the span of a held breath, the pupils tightening before dropping, chin dipping in a nod that never landed, fingers curling on a knee before the applause caught them too, palms coming together quieter, apologetic, but still part of it, the line of their mouth pinched for a heartbeat before it spread back smooth, merging with the others. The sound washed. I didn't lift my glass, fingers loosening enough to let it rest without sound, palm pulling back just an inch, settling in the fold of the napkin, eyes lowering to the grain of the wood where light caught in strips, thin and gold, breaking over the edge of the table before falling away, the warmth pooling around the place they'd claimed, leaving this side in a hush that felt cool on my cheek, breath slipping slow between lips, held just. I pushed the chair back slow, the legs grating soft over tile, no voice rising to catch me, no shift in the hum of the room, light bending once across my shoulder before falling away, my foot finding the floor with careful weight, heel pressing, then toe, as the hem of my coat slid against my leg in a hush no one heard. As the hem of my coat slid against my leg in a hush no one heard. The air outside the doorway changed, cooler, thinner, brushing the collar of my shirt, the fabric moving with no urgency, my shoulder lowering under it, the laugh from inside trailing, muffled, growing small behind the glass, my fingers adjusting the cuff once, letting it fall back against my wrist without fuss, breath held at the edge of my mouth before easing out, nothing left to say into it. I turned enough to see the glass pane catch me, my face there only at the margin, blurred, the edge of my cheek smudged by reflection, inside brighter than it had to be, light catching on teeth bared in jokes that rolled smooth, hands lifting glasses in toast without pause, no place held empty, no voice missing, the sound reaching me soft round, as though the wall pressed it flat before letting it go. My fingers touched the cold metal of the railing, not gripping, just laid there, the wind drawing the fabric of my coat back until it found stillness, thumb brushing once over the edge, then falling away, my arm lowering, elbow relaxing at my side, no tremor in it. The fabric creasing quiet at the bend, my weight settling even over both feet. Shoes. Meeting. I let my eyes find the dark past the window, the line where light from inside ended, running gold along the floor, before stopping clean, breath easing through my teeth, shoulders falling in a slow final slack, my mouth pressing closed around no words, no question left to give shape to, the warmth of the room. Before wing behind me, throwing one last edge of brightness over my back. Before the door, I saw him step forward quietly, slipping through the crowd without drawing notice, his coat brushing lightly against mine as he passed. The air shifted with that faint movement, a subtle change I hadn't expected. He spoke softly, words barely above a whisper, but steady enough to cut through the murmur of voices around us. "You always said that. Remember?" My breath caught, lodged somewhere deep in my chest, and my eyes blinked slowly, the world narrowing to a fragile moment. I felt the room fade at the edges, colors dulling like a photograph left too long in the sun. The chandelier's light spilled across the table, warm and golden on the faces that laughed. But it felt too wide, too empty around me. My shoulders rose and fell once, a quiet surrender as the weight of the words hung in the space between us. I didn't look at him immediately. Instead, my gaze drifted sideways, catching the blurred outline of his figure reflected in the glass pane behind the table. His hand curled around the back of a chair, fingers flexing softly, as if unconsciously, holding on to something. His head tilted slightly, patient but with no expectation. I pressed my lips together, one corner twitching as a faint memory flickered to life, and then slipped away. My breath exhaled slowly through my nose, the sound almost lost beneath the surrounding hush. Finally, I turned, the movement slow and deliberate, like the camera pulling back to reveal a new frame. Light fractured across my face in uneven strips, the candle flickering low on the table, catching the moisture in my eyes without spilling tears. His face was half lit, half shadowed, a quiet presence caught between clarity and mystery. The small curve of understanding in his eyes held no demand, no accusation, just an unspoken acknowledgement. My fingers shifted nervously over the napkin in my lap, smoothing the fabric in gentle, unconscious strokes. The cloth's texture pressed softly against my skin, grounding me as I fought the swell of emotions rising like tide beneath calm waters. My hand rose slowly, hesitating just above the glass of wine before withdrawing, the thumb tracing the seam as if searching for a familiar edge to hold on to. I settled back into my chair, the weight shifting with quiet resignation. My eyes lowered to the grain of the wooden table, the polished surface catching the glow of the candlelight in shimmering fragments. The room seemed to hold its breath with me, each laugh, each clink of silverware fading into a muted echo, distant and unattainable. In that fragile silence, a thought hovered at the edge of consciousness, unformed and tentative, a flicker of the woman I used to be, just beyond reach, but not entirely lost. The reflection in the glass revealed a face both familiar and strange. Soft lines marked by time and distance, eyes that held stories not yet told. The light shifted again, wrapping around my silhouette like a cloak, warm but distant, as I let the moment settle, still and profound. No words came to break the silence, no gestures to claim what had been whispered. Only the quiet strength of a soul stirred, ready perhaps to rise again. The badge slipped quietly from the edge of a folder, falling onto the polished floor with a soft clink that shattered the low hum of conversation like a sudden hush. The letters glinted sharply in the candlelight. Captain Firefighter. The name was unmistakable, official, impossible to ignore. Time seemed to freeze. Forks hovered midair, the clatter of silverware stilled abruptly, and voices faltered as eyes lifted from plates and glasses to settle on the dropped badge. A ripple of silence spread, thick and heavy, settling over the room like a slow gathering storm. No one spoke. No one asked a question. The usual murmur of polite chatter vanished, replaced by an expectant stillness that pressed close enough to choke. Heads turned, glances exchanged, some hesitant, others cautious, as the weight of that name filled the space between us, reshaping the atmosphere without a word being spoken. The light from the chandelier cast sharp shadows that drew a tighter frame around me, isolating me in a spotlight of sudden clarity. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. My hands lay flat on the table, still as stone. I met the shifting eyes with steady, unwavering gaze. No pleading, no retreat. My lips remained closed, pressed into a calm line, the slightest tension lingering at the corners. The untouched glass before me caught the dim candlelight, fracturing it into delicate prisms that scattered gently across the polished surface, reflecting a quiet strength beneath the surface calm. The warmth of the room held on the edges, but the space immediately around me grew colder, heavier, charged with an unspoken recognition. My fingers brushed the stem of the glass slowly, deliberately, as if to reclaim something long forgotten but never truly lost. My eyes rose, steady and clear, not wavering beneath the weight of those silent acknowledgments, bearing the unyielding stillness of someone no longer invisible. The murmurs returned, softened and cautious, voices dipping into whispers threaded with respect and a dawning realization. It was not the careless laughter from before, but a different sound, the fragile acknowledgement of a truth too long ignored. The room itself seemed to bend, the light reshaping the lines around us as the badge lay between us, quietly rewriting the narrative without a single word spoken. I pushed the chair back slowly, the legs scraping softly against the worn tile floor, in a sound barely louder than a whisper. My weight shifted gradually, from one foot to the other, steady and deliberate. No hand reached out to stop me. No voice called my name or begged me to stay. The eyes around the table slid away, polite but distant, tracing paths that carefully avoided my presence, as if the space I once held had suddenly become too sharp, too real to acknowledge. The room's low murmur dropped just enough to leave a pregnant silence, but no one raised their voice to fill it. No one stepped forward. Then came a voice, quiet, hesitant. "Excuse me." Fragile and unsure, layered beneath the gentle clinking of glasses and soft laughter, as if the words themselves feared breaking the stillness. It was a question cast into the air, unanswered and alone, swallowed by the thick pause that hung heavy between us. I turned my eyes toward the source, offering a slight nod, so subtle it might have gone unnoticed. My lips pressed into a calm line, corners falling just enough to carry the weight of unspoken understanding. My fingers brushed the edge of the folded napkin resting on the table, smoothing the fabric slowly, methodically, before sliding it across the polished wood with a care that felt like a quiet assertion, a reclaiming without claim or confrontation. The glass before me caught the low amber light, still full, the surface trembling with fractured reflections, untouched, serene. Behind me, the warmth of the room pulsed with soft laughter and conversation, distant and gentle, weaving through the golden glow pooled in the center of the table. Yet the space I left behind felt colder, heavier, a silence that was not empty but charged with meaning. The spotlight shifted gradually away from where I stood, shadows creeping longer, enfolding the room into layers of light and dark, poised in fragile balance. My footsteps were measured as I stepped away, each movement slow and steady, leaving behind the empty chair, the glass, and the carefully folded napkin. Silent markers of a story told not with words, but with absence. The camera held on that vacant space, the light catching the edges as if waiting, watching, a silent witness to the quiet return of something once lost, now reclaimed. "Excuse me," I said softly, the words blending seamlessly with the stillness. And I did not wait for permission.